Hey guys, welcome to this video with myself Alex, and today I'm going to be talking about emotional release. You know, we hear lots these days about releasing emotions, letting go of emotions, and of course that is a great thing. It's a great thing to release, but I often find that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding when it comes to release. And that's simply because when we go to workshops or we go to events or retreats or whatever that includes some level of release, or it's titled an emotional release workshop, we often have a certain level of disconnect from our bodies. Like we don't really have too much of awareness of the body when we're attending these workshops or sessions, or whatever it is. So I just want to kind of put this out there that if you're going to participate in this type of work, if you're going to work on releasing emotions, working with our emotionality, that really comes from the body. That comes from deep down in this power center, this emotional center in the belly. And this takes work. It takes time to get in touch with our body. It takes time to get in touch with our emotions. And I spent about almost a year, even longer in fact, in a personal development center where we worked with expressing our emotions. Every other workshop was an emotional release workshop. That's what they called it. However, it was very rare that I'd even release emotions. I'd go in there and I'd be screaming and shouting, and I'd be trying to cry. I'd be forcing these certain emotional responses, these emotional releases from my body. But it was very rare I had an authentic, spontaneous release. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, in the sense that we can't release emotions. We can't express our emotions from the mind. It's a bodily experience. And so many of us are cut off from our bodies. It's difficult and it takes time to get into that emotional expressive state for it to be an automatic response, a spontaneous response, should I say. So working with something like bioenergetics, working with something that really focuses on bringing the attention into the body, getting more awareness of our soma, of our sense of our body, really facilitates us in getting this emotional release. Because when I was in this community, this center, it's a bit of both. It's a community and a center, a therapy center, spiritual center. When I was in there and I was doing all of this screaming and shouting, it was really just coming from my head. I was shouting and screaming and crying, but I never really released. I just give myself a headache half the time. I was really going through it, and I thought the louder I shout, the more I will, like crying or trying to cry, the more effective it's going to be. But in truth, I just come up further away from my body. It become a very heady experience, this trying, this seeking, this creating of a spontaneous release. This trying to create a spontaneous release, it just never happened. But after practicing lots of bioenergetics, and I'm sure there's many other practices like it, where I bring awareness into my body, I notice that the body has its own timing, and that has nothing to do with you or me. We can't create that. All we can do is get in touch with the belly, this emotional center, get in touch with the body, our wider sense of self, and see what the body has to say, see what the body wants to release. You're never going to be able to force a release. And like I say, you'll probably just give yourself headache like I did. But you can build a relationship with the body. You can commit each day to feeling the body. And when you feel the body, when you open to the body, then you give space to the body to release, to express. And this release, this expression is much more authentic. And usually it's not really a big like, it makes me think about the primal scream therapy, if you're familiar with that, where, the basic theory from what I understand was, if you have like one big scream from the belly, then that's enough. Like it kind of clears out everything. Maybe there's some truth to that, but I never had that experience. But in doing the bioenergetics in giving the body space to open. The releases are often a lot more subtle. There's a certain subtlety to release, and it's not really this big sort of wailing, crying, screaming, kicking, shouting, whatever experience. It's much more subtle, and it's often a lot more soft. But it's way more potent, and we can feel that. We can feel it, like maybe the body just shakes a little bit, or like your head will fling to one side. You know, you'll be like throw your arms out, but then it kind of stops. You know, like the body just gives a little bit. It's like this kind of jerking type of motion, or some spontaneous sound will just leave. But then quite often, the body shuts back down, or the nervous system starts to encase itself again. It gives a little bit of release, a little bit of integration, and then it shuts. And this is the process. This is the process for most of us, I'd say. I've not met too many people that have had sort of similar, dissimilar experiences. Usually it is this kind of like little open, big contraction, little open or little release, big contraction. But even though it's a little release, it's way more effective, because in the process, we're beginning to understand ourselves more. You know, we're not just trying to escape by screaming and shouting and having this, like, realistically a mental experience, a psychological experience, when it needs to be a bodily experience. So we are going to be releasing when we do certain somatic practices such as bioenergetics, but we're also building a connection to the body, and that is way more valuable. It's way more valuable because we start to understand ourselves and our processes and our defenses a lot more intimately. We get closer to ourselves. We begin to know our thought patterns. We begin to know what we're actually holding in the body. You know, for me, it's often like a lot of sadness and a lot of hair. If I really get in touch with the spontaneous release inside of my experience, it's often sadness, like it's usually like tears. But if I was going to go to an emotional release workshop, you know, if it was like the anger part of it, like I can do or perform anger very well. It's like I've kind of mastered that sort of performative quality of anger to some degree. But sadness, you know, for me, and it'll be different for everyone, sadness is quite a difficult thing for me to express, and I wouldn't express that in an authentic way, because, you know, like I'm kind of scared of it, so it's like hid, you know. So what I'm saying is, if we're in like a workshop setting, it's like, now it's the crying part. Like I can force a little bit of crying, but the true, real, somatic, felt sense experience of sadness, of hair, is way too big, if you like. It's way too scary to my psyche. I'm just using myself as an example, you know. It's way too scary of an emotion, as an emotion, to feel and just let go in sort of 1 or 2 or 3 sittings. It needs to be this gradual process. It needs to be little opening, little release, big contraction. It doesn't need to be this, but this is often how it is, because it's generations, quite often, of repression, of pushing this stuff down. So yeah, hope this helps. Check out bioenergetics if you want to build more of a connection to the body. You know, working on these little mini releases is often really effective. Thank you.